can I ask you to introduce yourself and say something about your work?
My name is Charles LiMandri. I'm an attorney. I'm the founder and chief counsel of the Freedom of Conscience Defense Fund, which defends the religious liberty rights and pro-life interests, as well as people of faith and of non-faith who are people of conscience that are having their rights violated. We're there to help defend their interests.
You knew Dr. Joseph Nicolosi.
I had the privilege of working with him in a case that we handled a couple of years ago, and I asked him to serve as an expert witness in the case to basically explain how it is he's able to help people with unwanted same-sex attractions, since that was an issue in the case as to whether or not people could change their sexual orientation, and he's a foremost expert in the field. I had known about him, though, for years before that, was familiar with his work. I had known people who had benefited from seeing him and receiving his help, and I had listened to various radio programs that he had given over the years, so I had a great deal of respect and admiration for him even before I met him. But of course, in meeting him, I came to know the person and not just his work, and had a lot in common, not just because of our professional interests, but because of our Italian heritage and common background in many respects. So we became friends through working together, and I developed that much more of a deeper appreciation when I saw the genuine care and compassion he had towards people, including people on the other side of this case who had a completely different worldview and completely different goals about, preventing people from getting the type of help that Dr. Nicolosi was able to provide. But he, in a compassionate but yet courageous manner, continued to speak the truth about the issues that are very important regarding same-sex attraction, and about how people can and should have the right to determine their own destiny and live their lives in conformity with their deepest, most profound personal and religious values. And he did that in a way that was, I think, somewhat disarming to even the gay lawyers that were taking his deposition, and at the same time able to be on very good terms in a civil sort of way with them, so that there was no rancor or hostility, even though they came from a completely different perspective. So throughout that experience, I learned a lot about him and his work, and was able to benefit very greatly from that experience, and would like to see his work continue so that other people can continue to be helped by the work. And I'm happy to speak on behalf of him and what he did for so many people.
I understand at some point he was to be an expert witness, I think in the Jonah case.
Correct.
Can you say something about what happened in that situation?
I was asked by Arthur Goldberg, who was one of the co-founders of Jonah, Jews Offering New Alternatives for Healing, to defend him in that case, which was brought under the New Jersey Consumer Fraud Act. The case was brought there by the Southern Poverty Law Center, which is an extremist left-wing group determined to prevent people from getting help for unwanted same-sex attractions. They chose that jurisdiction for a couple of reasons. One is probably the most liberal state court system in the country when it comes to these issues. But two, New Jersey has the most extreme, what they call Consumer Fraud Act. The way it defines what could constitute fraud to be a violation of the law is far and away more extreme than most any other states, including liberal California, where I live and practice for the most part. Something can be considered a fraud in New Jersey even if it's technically true. And someone can sue under the New Jersey Consumer Fraud Act even though the statement, which was technically true, they didn't even hear it or rely on it. So, I mean, you've got people suing for things that are supposedly violations of the New Jersey Consumer Fraud Act that they were not really harmed by. But what made the case impossible to win were rulings by the very liberal trial court judge, one of which he adopted the opposition's argument that if anyone were to consider certain sexual behaviors to be disordered, including homosexual behaviors. Even if the people were saying that they were out of control, you could not call it disordered. That would be considered a violation of the New Jersey Consumer Fraud Act. Well, my clients with Jonah, being Orthodox Jews, did, as a basis of their religious beliefs, consider anything other than male-female sexual relations within the context of marriage from a biblically based view would be disordered as not part of God's plan. And the court said it would allow a very limited exception if you only spoke in those terms. But of course, running this ministry that they did for many years, they would oftentimes use the term disordered, which didn't appear strictly in a religious context. And the court said, basically as a matter of law, if they ever used the word disordered to refer to certain behaviors, not in a strictly religious context, it's automatically a violation of the New Jersey Consumer Fraud Act. And they allowed basically discovery of tens of thousands of emails over the course of over 10 years, people on a confidential listserv speaking supposedly freely and openly, and were able to mine that for things that they would consider to be a use of the term disordered in a non-religious context. So it became impossible not to find a violation of the New Jersey Consumer Fraud Act. And if any of the experts we had designated, including Dr. Nicolosi, ever used the term disordered in a psychological context, because they're not doing purely religious counseling, obviously, although they might speak in those terms with some of their patients if it was appropriate. But otherwise, that would automatically, according to the judge, exclude them from being able to testify, because the so-called legitimate professional organizations like the American Psychiatric and American Psychological Associations had both taken the position that homosexuality is quote-unquote not disordered when they delisted it from the list of disorders in the the Diagnostic Statistical Manual, the DSM, in 1973. Interestingly, one of our experts who wasn't going to testify because of his age was Dr. Nicholas Cummings, who said that he was the one who actually sponsored the resolution when he was president of the American Psychological Association to delist homosexuality as a disorder from the DSM. And he testified it was never intended to prevent people from getting help if they wanted it. And indeed, he said, as head of the Kaiser facility in San Francisco and having a team of psychiatrists working under him, they had helped thousands of people who had unwanted same-sex attractions over the years, and he had personally helped hundreds. So he knew for a fact that it can and does work if someone's mal-motivated and they want that help. Now, he said, I consider myself a liberal and I'm for gay rights and gay marriage and everything else, but that's completely different from preventing people from very much wanting help, getting help, which we know we can, for many of them, help them. And he actually wrote an editorial which was published in the USA Today about how wrong it was to be pursuing legislation or in this case a lawsuit to prevent people from getting that help. But again, notwithstanding all that evidence, the court predetermined the conclusion basically that the experts couldn't testify if they had ever used the term disordered in connection with homosexuality, and that my clients were automatically guilty if they had used the term disordered in anything other than a strictly religious context. And it's interesting because they wouldn't let me make First Amendment constitutional arguments of freedom of speech or freedom of religion. They said, no, this is only commercial speech, and you don't get those protections, which is not true. I mean, it's an Orthodox Jewish group, for Pete's sake. And not all the people that go there are practicing Jews, but many of them are. Many of them are Christians. There's even some Muslims that go. So for many of them, it is a faith-based dimension, and the counselors will integrate the religious beliefs into the therapy if that's what the patient wants. But even notwithstanding that, they didn't get those constitutional protections. So we felt we had excellent grounds to appeal, but the decision was made to resolve the case at that level so it wouldn't create binding judicial precedent that could be used in other cases against other organizations. So a lot of good came out of it, though.
We may have lost the case, but there must have been legal points that were scored that were important. Could you, in a short way, tell us what they were?
Yes. Of course, I was permitted to cross-examine the experts from the other side. Of course, it's not a fair fight if they have experts and we don't, but we were able to bring out through the other side's experts a lot of the literature that they supposedly were relying on. In fact, did prove that people can change their sexual orientation if they're highly motivated. And the past president of the American Psychiatric Association that they had as an expert was actually quite candid in her admissions that, yes, people should be able to have this treatment if they want it. And yes, there is evidence that people do benefit from this treatment. And no, there really isn't any evidence that people are harmed by this treatment. Now, that's all on the official court transcripts, and those are available. And I think the other side is loath to want to bring this case ever again because the admissions made by at least this one expert, who was the one with the most prestigious credentials, made it quite clear that for most any organization that's not in New Jersey and not under the New Jersey Consumer Fraud Act, they'd be able to survive that kind of attack. And even true of their other experts who had done studies in the field, they had to admit that a large share of the people that they had interviewed said they did benefit tremendously from going through some type of program like Jonah or the North Star program for Mormons, or Exodus type programs when they existed, or the North type programs. And these were all cited in studies that the other side's experts had relied on as producing positive results for people. And then I was able to bring out the work of Dr. Neil Whitehead about the identical twin studies and how there's no genetic link. There was admissions made that there is no genetic link that people are aware of. So there's a lot of good information came out in the trial. And the reason why we lost again was only because of the strict way the New Jersey Consumer Fraud Act is worded, and the judge's ruling that if you called it disordered, it violates the New Jersey Consumer Fraud Act. But not because people can't change or don't change, or because people are harmed in trying to change. Those things were all dispelled. So that's, I think, positive aspects, and that information is available as public record. We have it posted on our website. It's available, and I would encourage people to avail themselves of it.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Very helpful.
My pleasure.